Okay, thanks again, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name is Christina Medved. I'm the Director of Community Outreach for Roaring Fork Conservancy. And we have folks from all over the state of Colorado and even outside of Colorado joining us tonight. And we're so grateful that you are all here. We're really grateful to have Francisco here. And while we're just doing a little bit of an orientation here, an introduction in the beginning, because we have so many people that we haven't seen before, if you wouldn't mind just dropping me a little note in the chat box, letting us know how you found out about tonight, that just helps us with our future public relations for programs such as this. So just as a quick little housekeeping, if you will, Francisco is going to be taking questions tonight, so feel free to use the chat box at any point. And he will also go ahead and have some pauses in his presentation to allow for some interaction and dialogue. And so until those moments, we do ask that you please stay muted, just because we are recording tonight, and this video will be available on our YouTube channel by tomorrow morning. So on that note, let me go ahead and get started. Just to give you a brief introduction to who Roaring Fork Conservancy is before I turn the microphone over to Francisco for the night. So for those of you not as familiar with our work, the Roaring Fork Conservancy is located on the western slope of Colorado. And this little blue area right here is the Roaring Fork watershed. And so we don't look very big as a watershed, and we're actually not. We're only about 1,400 square miles. We're roughly the size of the state of Rhode Island, but we are actually a very important headwater to the entire Colorado River watershed, which I will get into a little bit more detail on my next slide here. But the reason we are an important headwater is because of our watershed divide here. We have 7 14ers in our watershed alone that hold on to snow well into spring and summer on really good years, and so they can provide a substantial water supply throughout the year. So we are actually celebrating our 25th year as the watershed organization for the Roaring Fork Valley, and our mission is to inspire people to explore, value, and protect the Roaring Fork watershed. We primarily do that through our watershed science and policy programs and our watershed education programs. Our science piece includes everything from stream monitoring to targeted studies. And with our policy work, what we like to do is to engage with all of the stakeholders to come up with solutions that help improve our rivers and streams. And our watershed education programs, or through our watershed education programs, we reach over 5,000 individuals a year on average. And that includes everything from our K through college programming and our family and adult programming. And I invite you to go to our website to learn a lot more about the work that we do there. Now, bouncing back into the Roaring Fork watershed, just to give you a little orientation here, the orange areas right here are where our really high elevations are. And this greenish, bluish area right here are our river valleys. And so we have 3 major rivers in this watershed. Of course, our namesake watershed is the Roaring Fork River, which begins here at this blue pin near Independence Pass. And it flows through the city of Aspen and then Basalt, which is where we are headquartered. And this is where we have the confluence with the Frying Pan River, which begins here. And then once we're back in the Roaring Fork River here, we flow through Carbondale, which is where we have the confluence with the Crystal River. And then ultimately the Roaring Fork River, it flows about 75 miles before it gets to Glenwood Springs, where it eventually deposits into the Colorado River. Now, the one thing I want to mention about our 3 major rivers is that you can see they all begin in these really mountainous areas. And they actually all begin in designated wilderness areas. And so this is all forested area right here. And we predominantly do have really good water quality here, very high water quality here, except for a few places that we're actively working on, but I don't actually have time to talk about that tonight. So that's a whole other presentation you could, or even a different conversation you could email me about. But we do have, for the most part, really good water quality here. And that's primarily because we have our headwaters are completely forested. And in addition to being known for our gold medal trout fishing rivers and our ski mountains, we are also, and our hot springs, we're also home to one of the most photographed mountain ranges in North America, which is the Maroon Bells, which is just down the street from us. And so I want to put this in a bigger context for everybody tonight on where we are located. in our watershed here. If you take a look at this map, this is a big chunk of the Western United States of America and Mexico. And if you take a look at this dark black outline here, this is the Colorado River watershed. So all of the land area that ultimately drains into the Colorado River. You can see it goes through 7 states, 2 countries. This little area in pink right here is the Roaring Fork watershed. So I mentioned before, we're not that big of a watershed, but we're a mighty watershed. And I'll tell you what, our watershed makes up only about 0.5% of this whole Colorado River watershed, but we contribute about 10% of the flow to the Colorado River on an annual basis. And again, just as a reminder, though, that's because of the snow. It's because of the high elevations that we have here. And where Francisco is right down near here. And he's going to tell us about the work that they're doing way down in here. So because we're all connected, it was in 2019 that we started the Berkshire Watershed Institute. And the premise of the Watershed Institute was to invite water leaders such as Francisco to talk to us about local, regional, state, international projects, water projects, and to show how we're all connected to them, because we're at the source. Francisco's down almost at the sea, and it's like we have such a great connection here and a collaboration. We're so excited to have you here tonight. The other part of the Watershed Institute is to ensure that you all that are here tonight have access to these water leaders so that you can ask your questions directly to him. And so we invite you to do that. You know, we want to have an interactive conversation with you all tonight. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share, Francisco, so that you could stop share so that you can go ahead and bring your PowerPoint up. And while we do that, I will go ahead and introduce you to everybody. So Dr. Francisco Zamora joined the Sonoran Institute in April 2002 to manage activities in the delta of the Colorado River. Dr. Zamora has more than 14 years experience working in the delta as a researcher and project manager. As the Senior Director of Programs, he is responsible for integrating community stewardship, applied science, and local values in an alliance to reform water policy, conserve and restore priority areas, and build knowledge and capacity for collaboration between water managers and local leaders. Dr. Zamora has developed close relationships with Mexican and U.S. agencies involved in water and land management, and communities frequently, and communicates frequently with regional or national officials dealing with issues in the Colorado River Delta. He spends a good portion of his time in the field working with communities, visiting potential restoration areas, and doing field research and restoration work. He obtained his PhD in resource geography from Oregon State University in October 2002, with a minor in natural resource economics. He also holds a master's degree in marine resource management from Oregon State University and a Bachelor of Science in Oceanography from Autonomous University of Baja California. He has published his work on ecological restoration, policy, and binational collaboration issues in the Delta. We're so excited to have you here tonight, Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Is my presentation on? Everything is working? Technology is helping us?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the invitation. And, you know, we finally, after 3 months, or I don't know if more than 3 months, when we first talked about it, it is a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you all the participants, all who are connected. It's great. I always enjoy this type of presentations, especially when there is kind of no limits of time or not, you know, usually like 15 minutes or 20 minutes. We have now more time, and what I have prepared for you is really a combination of a slideshow with some information, and then there is one video that I want to show you. And then, as Christina mentioned, I want to have the opportunity for interaction. So sometime during the presentation, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then, you know, I'm going to invite you to open your microphone and your camera, and then we'll have a conversation. Hopefully, you know, that's something that, you know, will allow us to share more information. and answer any questions that you may have. Sorry, the phone. I have two dogs here, so that's they are quiet now, but just in case. Okay, well, let me begin with a little bit of just about Sonoran Institute. We are a community-based conservation organization. We're based in Tucson, Arizona, but we have offices in Denver. We have an office in Denver, in Phoenix. We used to have an office in Phoenix, and even though we are pretty close to Phoenix, we decided to keep our office in Tucson, and so our headquarters are in Tucson. And then we have an office in Mexicali in Mexico. Our mission is to connect people and communities with the natural resources that nourish and sustain them. And I like this picture, it kind of reflects that. I took this picture a few years ago during the post flow, and we'll talk about the post flow. And this is really my passion, really connect people with the natural resources, because that's how I grew up, really. My father used to take us camping, fishing, hiking, and that I really think that was why I got so passionate about environment conservation, and I decided to study oceanography. So again, connecting people with the natural resources is kind of in my blood, and I enjoy. I love to all these almost 20 years that I've been working with Sonoran Institute. And so anyway, let me continue with the presentation. Hopefully this image, the quality is good enough that you can see this hummingbird, and inside the nest there is a little guy over there, hungry, you know. And I took this picture, and oh, I was so excited when I took it, but you know, in the camera, you don't know, you cannot see with the, you know, the small screen for displaying your camera. I knew it was a good picture, but I until I, you know, came to Tucson and was able to download the pictures and look at that on my computer, on my big monitor, then I realized that there was this little guy inside the nest, and to me that I got really connected to the picture, and I've been using this picture, and I don't want to say in all the presentations, but in most of my presentations, because it really kind of connects me to not only to what I do as an individual, as a professional, but also what we do at the Sonoran Institute and what we do in the Colorado River Delta as member of a larger coalition of organizations trying to restore the river in the Delta. The picture, and I'll try to explain this as we go, you know, along in the presentation, but it makes me think about the past, of course, the present and the future, you know, and there are things in the past that we as you know, humans have done that affect our present now, you know, and the things that we do now will have an impact in the future. And the way I like to see this, remember when, well, I remember when I was growing up and I had a bike. I just always, this example, because I think it's a good analogy. Oh, you know, I had my bike, and when somebody wanted to borrow my bike, you know, I would say, well, I don't know if I want to kind of allow you to use my bike. Are you gonna return it in the same condition or in a different condition? You know, because something may happen. So I always bring that when I look at this picture, because we really need to do a better job to leave a better world for the future generations. And that's an old proverb that we have not inherited the land or the resources from our parents, but we actually are kind of borrowing that from our kids, from the future generations. So going back to the analogy of the bike, if I borrow the bike from someone, I'm making a commitment to bring back, to return that bike in the same condition or better condition. So that's what I'm trying to really explain here. This little guy deserves that opportunity. And of course, that translates to the kids, to people living or depending on these natural resources, not only the wildlife, but people who have not seen the river with water. Can you think about that? Maybe where you are, of course, you are in the in the headwaters of the basin, and you see the water there. And I saw the river, close to Glenwood. What's the city? Glenwood Springs, or anyway, close to
Glenwood
there.
Springs. Yep.
Yeah. We used to have an office there many years ago, actually. So anyway, but here in the Delta, the new generations, the kids, many of them have not seen the river with water, and that just gives you a different perspective of the situation. So anyway, I like this picture. I wanted to share that, and keep that in mind. We really, or I believe, and Sonoran Institute and our partners are really trying to restore the Delta to live a better place for our future generations. So I'm gonna share a short video. Part of the ongoing restoration efforts in the Claw River Delta, especially in the last few years. The first time was in 2014. We had put water in the river. We have put in water as what we call in-channel flows. So on a regular day, there is no water flowing in the river. So that is why it's so important, these two events. So far, two events, hopefully more in the future. But in 2014, we had what now is known as the post flow, okay? Because it was a lot of water in a small amount of time. But this video is about the in-channel flows, the in-channel flow event that we have last year. And so I wanted to share that with you. Hopefully this is gonna work and is going to, okay, here we go.
El río Colorado forma parte de una cuenca transfronteriza. Es compartida entre México y Estados Unidos.
Water has been very important to development of the western United States and northwestern Mexico.
En 1944 se realizaron los primeros tratados para conciliar el manejo del agua.
And when the rules were made to develop water, people were not thinking about the river, and as a result, the Colorado River Delta really was left to die with no water.
Y al borde de la muerte, solo se mantenía en el recuerdo de las generaciones pasadas su exuberante agua, belleza y vida.
Yo crecí en el río, entonces a mí me tocó ver los momentos más cuando el río estaba en su, pues lleno, que no teníamos ningún problema. Pensaba yo que pues jamás nos iba a hacer falta el agua del río, ¿verdad?
Antes mi abuela, cuando me platicaba, pues hablaba de dimensiones grandes, cantidades grandes, flora y fauna.
Pues nosotros en nuestra infancia, más o menos de los 12, 13 años ahí nos la llevábamos en el río bañándonos y todo, pero había mucha sombra, mucha vegetación. Todo el tiempo era un agua cristalina, muy bonita, que mirabas los pescados allá y pues todo se destruyó, toda la vegetación se secó. Uno que otro logró sobrevivir ahí, pero ya no. Ya nada fue igual.
No agua, no vida. So if we want to have a river here and every living thing that depends on the river, then we need some water for the river.
Ya había estado estudiando todo el esquema de agua del Valle de Mexicali. Yo sabía que era imposible poner agua con fines ambientales en el río, habiendo tanta demanda de agua para fines agrícolas. Entonces yo inicialmente les dije, discúlpenme, pero yo no le entro a eso, están totalmente fuera de sí, no saben lo que están diciendo, no van a recibir ni una gota de agua. Y luego me tuve que dar golpes contra la pared y pedir disculpas porque la frase que aquí se debe usar es: cuando deseas el bien de la naturaleza, puede cumplirse.
The Raise the River Coalition has brought together nonprofits from US and Mexico. In many ways, the first thing we had to do was bring together the governments of the US and Mexico. And our intent has been to get those two governments to work together on better management of the Colorado River, including water for the river.
El acto 319 fue el primer acto donde se designó por primera vez agua para el medio ambiente.
Durante este evento se liberaron agua al río con el objetivo de volver a imitar los flujos que ocurrían de manera natural, derivados del deshielo en la parte alta de la cuenca.
Este flujo representó casi el 1% de lo que solía descargarse en el delta.
Este conocimiento previo ayudó a que este año se liberaron flujos ambientales durante varios meses. El agua llegó a la presa Morelos y posteriormente se derivó a canales de los distritos de riego y finalmente se canalizó en algunas compuertas que fueron elegidas estratégicamente para liberar la magnitud de los flujos que estábamos esperando y también para beneficiar a las zonas donde hay sitios de restauración.
Este flujo de agua se descargó en 164 días y logró conectarse exitosamente con el estuario.
El trabajo en el delta del río Colorado es un gran reto. Es un reto enorme porque además de ser uno de los ríos más importantes de América, se había perdido toda la esperanza de que se pudiera volver a llenar de agua. Eso pasa con muchos ríos del mundo y el ejemplo del delta del río Colorado es para replicarse, porque ahorita con el avance que tenemos hemos demostrado que el agua del río es posible de mantenerse con un trabajo adecuado de restauración y de monitoreo. Sin embargo, nos falta mucho, todavía hay un gran desafío porque tenemos que restaurar todavía muchos kilómetros del río.
Estamos juntos, los esfuerzos que estamos haciendo son de manera conjunta y que así vamos a seguir juntos trabajando y de la mano para beneficio del delta, que nosotros eso es lo que buscamos, ¿no?
El río Colorado forma parte de la identidad de la región.
Vuelve otra vez a renacer ese sentimiento de identidad, ¿no?
Lo mejor que pueda pasar, que el río siga vivo, que tenga agua, siga teniendo agua.
Que hubiera más agua. Como lo que está pasando ahorita, que el río está pues recibiendo agua.
Mi abuela, que siempre ha luchado porque el río tenga vida.
Si pudiéramos restaurarlo todo, sería una chulada.
Thank you. Hopefully the sound and the video was okay. And I would like to invite you, if you have any initial comments or questions before I continue my presentation. So at the end of the video, if there are any comments or questions.
I'm going to jump in until somebody has a question, but you had mentioned that there normally is no water running through the river, and maybe you're going to get through this or go through this in the rest of your presentation. So in regards to some of the imagery that we just saw, and not related to the 2014 pulse flow, but would you say, is there water in the river right now? If there's no water in the river, how are the restoration projects being maintained with no water? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
No, it does. It does. And it's there is no water flowing along the main stem of the Colorado River in Mexico. There are a few areas where groundwater is pretty close to the surface, and you see some open water areas, but it's not flowing. And during the summer, not all, but many of those areas dry up because the heat, and so it depends on basically on groundwater.
Okay.
Again, along the main stem of the Colorado River, there is kind of a tributary to the Colorado River, which is the Hardy, H-A-R-D-Y, Hardy River. And that river, it has water, but it's also from agricultural return flows or treated effluent. So there is no natural flow, or it's all kind of, return flows from the many thousands of acres of farmland in the Mexicali Valley. So I will show some pictures of the restoration, and I'll explain that a little more. But what we've done is secure some water in the delta, in the water rights that the coalition, the open NGOs have, and we use that water to irrigate the restoration sites and get the trees established. And then these other flows that go into the main channel is to, of course, maintain habitat, but also enhance and create new habitat, and then have a flowing river too. So yeah, there will be, I'll have a few slides about that too. And
okay.
Some numbers, yeah. Any other comment?
I don't think there are any more questions.
Okay, so I'll continue with the presentation. So here we go again. So we saw the video. So a little bit just of the how the delta used to look. And Hoover Dam was completed in 1935, more or less. This picture is from the late 1940s. So it was after Hoover Dam, but it was before Glen Canyon Dam. And what you can see is really a river flowing. This is all of this is on the Mexican side of the delta. And you see the water there. You see the river, all the meanders. So it looks actually pretty good. So there was still water, after Hoover Dam was built and was. This is from 1956, and what you see here at the top is Morelos Dam. Is the last dam along the river. Half of the dam, or more or less half, on the left side is Mexico. On the right side is the U.S. because for about 22 miles, the Colorado River is the border between Mexico, again on the left part of the image, and the United States on the right side. So But what I'm trying to show here is Morelos Dam is a diversion dam. So there is not necessarily a reservoir behind the dam, but it basically what it does is to allows the water to go into this irrigation canal that you see on the left. And that's how Mexico gets its allocation of water from the Colorado River. Of course, this in 1956, there was enough water to meet that allocation. And of course, you know, the remaining amount will flow through the dam. And you can see a really nice, very wide, you know, channel, river channel here. This is the main stem of the Colorado River. This is a little later in 1985. This was after Glen Canyon Dam, but we had a pretty good wet years in that decade. And as you can see, there is a lot of water in the image here. This is the downstream side of the dam. So a lot of water, even the spillway here, there is water going around the spillway. Again, 1985. So even after the construction of the Glen Canyon Dam, there had been a few events in the 70s, 80s, and 90s where we had water flowing in the river, not on a permanent basis, but for a few months or even a year or 2 years. And then after that, beginning really in 2000, I think it was by 2000 or 2001, that was the beginning of the drought. And since then, there have been no events in terms of putting water in or having a flowing river. Only it was until the 2014 when we did the post flow, and last year in 2021. Anyway, this will give you an idea of a regular day at Morelos Dam. Remember the channel that we saw in the previous pictures? Now is this channel that is probably no more than I don't know, maybe 6, maybe 10 feet across. And the water that you see here downstream from the dam is mainly seepage from the dam, from the gates of the dam. So there is no flow. And the upstream of the dam, you see the Colorado River. And so the water that gets here is to deliver the water to Mexico, and it goes into the irrigation canals. So this is pretty much a regular day in at Morelos Dam. And on the other end, on the southern end of the river, you get to see this. Basically, there is no water. This is the tidal part of the delta where the river will meet the sea, and this is a picture. The Gulf of California it's downstream or on the bottom part of the picture, and the top part of the picture is looking upstream. And as you can see, it seems like the tides are trying to reach out upstream and meet the river. And what happened is really that all of the water has been allocated, and this part is not new to you, has been allocated in 2 countries, Mexico and the US, 7 states in the US, 2 states in Mexico. And this map actually now shows that a portion of the basin is on the Mexican side over here. A little bit about the coalition and the restoration efforts in the Colorado River Delta began in, I would say, late 1990s. And many people have been involved, different organizations. And, you know, it has been a process. But right now, in the last few years, the NGOs working in the Delta got together and formed this coalition, the Raise the River Coalition, or in Spanish it's called Alianza Revive el Río Colorado. And there are 6 organizations that you know, are collaborating as part of this alliance. coalition, Admon, Natura Noroeste, Restauremos el Colorado, the Nature Conservancy, Sonoran Institute, and the Red Force Center. And we have been working together for the last 6-10 years in developing restoration plans, working on the binational collaboration, and spending a lot of time implementing those plans. I mentioned that part of the restoration or the restoration process, I think a milestone or a key step in this process was in 2002 when we developed this what we call map of the possible, and it was not only NGOs, it was a collaboration with people from universities and water managers from both sides of the border. And we got together, worked for 3 days, worked very hard, looking at the opportunities, the threats, and develop this map of the possible. So that was really kind of the beginning of a more kind of the restoration process. We identified those areas where restoration was needed and it was feasible. That's why we call it map of the possible. It was not only needed, but it was feasible to restore those areas. And if we look now at 2021, almost 20 years after that, you could see that, in not exactly, but in most cases, we have been able to work and we're making significant progress in those areas that we identified as needing restoration in 2002. And we don't have time to look at those, but just here, this what we call Laguna Grande complex is right here on the map of the possible. It's kind of the heart of the Mexicali Valley, or the heart of the Colorado River in Mexico. It's pretty much the middle point between the border and the sea. This area is critical, and we have been able to make significant progress there. But all along the riparian corridor, and even in what we call the upper estuary. So this is an actual map of ongoing and future restoration projects. And I'll be just sharing a few images and some data about these sites. The Raise the River Coalition, the different organizations are working in different areas. There are 3 organizations implementing on-the-ground restoration projects along the riparian areas, and then the Nature Conservancy and Sonoran Institute, and other members to the coalition. But on the ground, in terms of on-the-ground activities, Sonoran Institute and the Nature Conservancy are also working on what we call the upper estuary. So together, what we are trying to develop is a network of restoration sites. And when you put those sites on the map and you look at the corridor, the idea is that this restoration or this habitat areas in good condition will contribute to create a functional ecological corridor. It will be impossible to restore every acre or in the Colorado River Delta, but based on the information that we have been able to develop to the last 2 decades, it is feasible to restore these areas. And when you put those together, we will be creating a functional corridor. It has taken 20 years to get to this point. In this picture here, by the way, Christina, can you see the cursor? Because I'm using it, I'm not sure that it shows on. Yeah, okay. Well, this guy over here is me 20 years ago. And this other guy here is Oswald Hinojosa. And together we have been working in the Delta for over 20 years. And this was the first restoration project in Campo Mosqueda. On the right picture, the right side is Germán Muñoz. He owns a tourist camp along the Hardy River. And this was one of the early restoration projects. So what I'm trying to point out is that we decided to, with the resources that we had at that time, we say, okay, let's work with the communities and let's begin the restoration, and that's how we began learning, getting people excited. A lot of the local users or the local people wanted to do small restoration projects, and that's how we began. And this is my friend Oswald. I like this picture because it highlights the collaboration. And many more people should be in this picture, but I don't have one picture with all the people, but I want to I use this picture just to highlight that it has been a process of many years, at least 20 years, and even more, but in terms of the underground restoration, 20 years. And it's a collaboration and ambition because, oh, by the way, you heard in the video, Dr. Ramirez, he said, you guys were crazy. He didn't believe that we could put water in the river and restore. Well, many people had that same kind of, or were thinking the same, and it took a lot of hard work and convincing and, knocking at different doors and being able to show, hey, you can restore small areas. You don't need a lot of water. You need water, but not necessarily a lot of water. And that's how we were able to get people excited. So collaboration and vision, passion, time, making sure that it's not going to happen in 1 year. It's not going to happen in 5 years. It's going to take time. And the first binational agreement was signed in 2012, minute 319. So it really took us 10 years, more or less, or 12 years to get to that point. And so anyway, I just wanted to highlight that collaboration, vision, and really on the ground work. And this is an image on the upper estuary, closer where the river meets the sea. And because of the lack of water, sediments have been deposited along the main channel, and there was no longer a well-defined channel. So basically, we had to reconnect in terms of removing some of those sediments so that the river could come downstream or flow downstream, and the tides could bring water, upstream, and the river will meet the sea. And so many of these people are from the Cocapa, the community, indigenous community in the lower part of the Delta, and they understood that it was needed to reconnect the river or remove the sediments because many of them were fishermen or are fishermen, and they used to fish along the river. And after we did this, they were actually finding some of the fish species upstream, something that they had not seen before. So it was a really clear example of the need to reconnect the river and the sea, not only with putting more water, but also removing some of these sediments. And this is another level of collaboration. This is the International Boundary Water Commission commissioner from the US on the right, and from Mexico on the left. And this is minute 323, signed in 2017. And again, it's just another major step after Minute 219 was signed in 2012. You had a duration of 5 years. In 2017, there was the next or the continuation of that binational agreement for another 9 years. So we are now implementing Minute 323, and it ends in 2026. So we still have a few years to go, and we have a specific, restoration plans, monitoring plans, and it's kind of no, it's not only about restoration. I need to say that. So it's not, these binational agreements are not only about restoring or the environment. In fact, the environment component is just one of 8 or 9 different components. Overall, it's really about water management, how to find ways, to manage water on a binational basis, so that people on both sides benefit from that, from the way we manage the water. So it's pretty significant. So if you add Minute 319 to Minute 323, the collaboration, the science, implementation, these are kind of the elements of the ongoing restoration efforts and again, water management at the binational level. And it's science, there is a lot of science in terms of looking at not only the existing conditions, but what are the impacts, hydrological and ecological impacts of the restoration efforts. So it's a lot of, there is a science team, a lot of people participating. This is a few pictures from the 2014 post flow. This is Morelos Dam. Just at the time the gates were open and water was flowing, and it took a lot of days to travel downstream. Very slow because the river channel was pretty dry, a lot of sand, a lot of infiltration. This is the same Morelos Dam and on day 5 of the post flow. I don't have the other picture here, but it looks pretty similar to the 1985 picture. The spillway, water was flowing around the spillway. So, and you see a lot of water. So very similar to what I show in the early pictures of the historic delta. So we did learn a lot from that post flow, and just some data here. The blue line is what we requested, or the plan in terms of how water was supposed to be delivered, and the red is how it was. So it was pretty good. The agencies and everyone working did pretty good, because in most cases we receive the water that was requested at the time and the location that was requested. And you may think, well, I mean, that's easy, no? Well, not necessarily, because there is a lot of planning. There are other users. The gates at the Morelos Dam, you cannot. There are limitations in terms of how much water you can go to, or you need to be able to meet the water orders in the U.S. and Mexico. So it was not easy, but it was done. It was successful. Again, just as an image about the science, we were able to measure how much water was infiltrated at the different portions of the river. And again, there were areas, especially close to the border, where there is it's pretty sandy and the groundwater is pretty deep, so a lot of infiltration in those areas. But eventually the water made it to connect with the river. Again, this was 2014, and only the duration of this event was 8 weeks. So pretty much 2 months. And the connection with the river was only pretty much at the end. I mean, with the sea, or with what we call the upper estuary. I mentioned that the river is the border between Mexico and the US for about 22 miles. so this is the southern end of those 22 miles. So here on the right side of the image of this highway bridge, the river in the middle is the border. So a portion of the river of the Colorado River in the US is dry too. So it's not only the Mexican portion, a portion of the US is also dry. Anyway, this was before the post flow, and this was during the post flow. And you can see the big change. You can see a lot of cars, underneath the bridge, people enjoying the river. So it was amazing. The water here only lasted for about a couple of weeks. So, but we had people there every day during those 2 weeks. And this is one of the restoration sites. This is one site that Sonoran Institute is managing, Laguna Grande restoration site. And you can see there was a lot of preparation, so that we can maximize the benefits of the post flow. And so we were able to connect these all meanders of the river with the main channel. The main channel of the river is here. It's upstream is on the right, and the water is flowing to the left downstream. And just a good indication that we spent a lot of time preparing, and it worked. And we got a lot of new twists established in this area because of that. And this is just a picture of, it's not exactly the same area, it's just a little bit, not even half a mile downstream from the previous picture. And you can see all the twists. Many of these twists, of course, if you go away from the water edge, we planted those twists and we are irrigating those twists. But having the post flow, having water in this channel, of course, helps to increase the groundwater table and helps all the twists. So in terms of trees, very successful. In terms of wildlife, also very successful. I'm gonna just show a few images of birds. If you are into bird watching, the Delta is a really good place to go. A lot of terrestrial birds, but we also have water birds. So very, very, very interesting. The response of the birds was pretty good. Increase the diversity and abundance of some species. And the response of the people was also very impressive. It was welcoming the river from day one, and they wanted to see water more days, in those areas. And these areas are providing opportunities for people to enjoy, not only to enjoy nature, but also to learn about nature. And this is, we have a program called Family Saturdays or Sábados Familiares. So on a Saturday, we invite families, and you can see a lot of kids there. That's important for us to bring the kids with their parents so they can both learn about the nature and enjoy it too. And some of them come back, later and visit the area again. We work with the schools, and they get to see the site, to use the binoculars, to see the birds, to experience, to have a really nice experience. And this is in Spanish. That's how we connect people with nature, or one of the ways that we connect that. But for us, having these restoration sites is not only important for the wildlife component, but it provides an opportunity for people to learn and enjoy nature. And of course, we celebrate. We have to celebrate because it's not easy, especially in the Delta. I don't know what is the temperature over there in Colorado during the summer. In the Delta, it reaches 120 degrees. So, it's not, I would say 110 degrees. It's a regular day in the Delta during the summer days. And when you are in the forest, in the middle of the cottonwood and willow forest, of course, you have several degrees lower, and you can feel that. You feel it, and you enjoy that. And so the communities are now that have these areas. By the way, in total, we have restored all the organizations together over 1,000 acres of riparian habitat. And this is just another map telling you the different areas. This is Laguna Grande Complex. Pro Natura Noroeste has different sites on the northern portion, Miguel Alemán, and they are beginning Janitzio this year. And this is what we call the upper estuary. And looking at the time, so it's 7:01. So I think we're doing okay. I only have a few more slides, and then we'll have enough time for Q&A. This is a site of the Laguna Grande restoration area. And it's just to show you, we had already removed the invasive and non-native vegetation, and we are planting, just beginning to plant trees. In this particular area, I think we did mesquite and cottonwood and willow. And this is just a few months really after, even in a one growing season, you can have, well, cottonwoods and willows, they grow fast. You could have 2 meters of growth in one growing season. Mesquite, of course, is a little more slower than cottonwood and willows. But anyway, you can see the transformation from year to year. So that helps. And in the background, you see all the more mature cottonwood and willow forests. In this particular site, we have close to 200 acres of cottonwood and willow forest. I think it's the largest cottonwood and willow forest on the Delta, well, on the Mexican side of the Delta. So the reforestation days are an opportunity again to connect people with nature. On the left is myself with my son, so I take the opportunity also to bring my son, just as my dad did, many years ago, or not that many years, but now I'm doing the same with my son, and my daughter had been there also in the Delta, and my wife, so we all enjoy that. And so people get to plant trees, and see, it's a family thing too. So sometimes we bring students from elementary school or high school or college, but we also bring families, and they work together to plant trees. I'm here with a good friends, farmers of the Mexicali Valley, and they have been supporting our work, and they I must say, after explaining and working with them and visiting the sites, they did really understood the importance of restoration in the Delta, and how Ramon Santillan, the person on the right, he grew up in the Mexicali Valley, and as a farmer, and now he wants to give something back to the river. Farming, the farmers, of course, they depend on the water of the river. They understand that, and after seeing that water was coming back to the river, seeing the restoration sites, and seeing the difference, he was really very excited and enthusiastic about restoration projects. Oh, and he's telling his son on the left, that's his son Juan, and hopefully, the new generation will be also engaged on restorations, on the restoration efforts. Okay, almost at the end. Just
Francisco, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We just had a good question. I think this is a good time to ask you. From Mendy, she's wondering, are there plans to plant more grasses and forbs in the restoration areas, or mainly trees and shrubs?
Oh, no, good, excellent question. No, we do plant shrubs and a few species of grasses. Not everywhere, but we are doing that more and more. In fact, there are areas that are mainly mesquite bosque, and we have more shrubs and grasses in some of those areas. So yes, the answer is yes, and we are doing more of that. Really, we wanted to establish that diversity in the vertical structure, you know, the understory, the mid-story, and the upper story. And it just happened that in the Delta, we lost, I don't know, close to 100%, well, 90+% of the cottonwood and willow forests. So the main target type of habitat was cottonwood and willow forest. But after a few years, then, you know, we moved into mesquite bosque, and now we are diversifying the habitat. It requires water, though, I mean, to maintain the grasses and the shrubs. So that's another thing that eventually we wanted to irrigate the sites for a few years, and then reduce irrigation or stop irrigating. I mean, that would be really the goal. But if you want to maintain a healthy habitat and the grasses and shrubs, and you will have to irrigate, not as often, of course, but, you know, once in a while, maybe 3 or 4 times during the growing season. So anyway, good question. Thank you. Again, just a few slides on most of the in-channel flows from last year. We saw it on the video at the beginning. Again, it was part of Minute 323. The total volume of water was 35,000 acre-feet. This is a very, very key component. It lasted 164 days, so about 5 months. And so from May 1st to October 10. We used 4 delivery points. In 2014, the post-flow, most of the water was delivered at Morelos Dam, but there was a lot of infiltration. So last year for this event, we decided to use 4 delivery points, and those points are here shown in the map. So we didn't deliver water at Morelos Dam. We put the water through the irrigation canals into this area, which is just, we call it Reach 4. And this one here, kind of the blue one here at the top of the map. And this is the area where, you know, groundwater is pretty close to the surface. So it was very, it is the most, in terms of conditions of groundwater, the hydrology in the area allows to maximize the benefits of putting water in the river, because that water will pretty much inundate some areas and then flow downstream. Extensive monitoring field work. You know, we had to measure water flows every day to account. I mean, that was part of the accountability, because, you know, part of the binational agreement, we had to measure flows. So a lot of people were in the field every day. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is the hydrograph. It really tells you the dark colors are the plan, or how we requested, or how the water was supposed to be delivered. So the darker yellow, the darker green, the red, and the darker blue. And the light colors is how the water was delivered. You know, it was pretty good. In most cases, it matches the request. The red line considers the infiltration and evaporation, or the losses. Remember, water came to the irrigation canals into the site, so it traveled at least 30-40 miles, and so there is a little bit of infiltration. So that's the difference. But overall, again, it was very successful in in meeting the hydrograph and at the 4 different sites. And, just a couple of pictures, the left before and the right picture, just only a few days after. And this is one of the crossing areas or highways, well, not highway, but it's a road. It's called Vado Carranza. It's pretty close to one of the largest communities in the Mexicali Valley. So a lot of people came here. And again, just to compare to the 2014 post flow, we had water in that area where I showed the bridge, which it's about 30 miles north of here, of this, what we see in the picture. But the water was there for 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks. Here we had water for almost 4.5 months. So, people will drive along and will see water and will say, what's happening here? We don't get to see water here. And not even, a day or two, now we see water for months, for weeks. So that was really very significant. I did experience the post flow in 2014, and I was following the river. This year, last year I couldn't do it because of the COVID, the travel restriction. So my staff in Mexicali had to do that. So they were following the river, the water edge, and this is just an image of how, they were just following the river. This is the Delta. There is a biosphere reserve here. I'm gonna use this map just to show you that, this part is basically what happened last year during the in-channel flows. You see the difference? Up to here, this is Laguna Grande. Chaucé is where we release the water or one of the delivery points. So water was flowing for almost 5 months all the way to here. So pretty close to what we call the upper estuary. It did reach the sea, or the water did connect with the sea, not on a permanent basis during those 5 months, but for a few days during those 5 months, or not a few days, really weeks, but it was not during the entire time. But up to here, it was connected. And then this other part that you see here is the Hardy River where there is water. So what I want to say is that this, in a way, is kind of the vision for the future. And we were able, or at least close last year, to realize that vision of having water flowing in the river. Now, something that is not shown in the map, but in the future, we also are going to try to put water in this area, what we call, from the border to this area that is another restoration site, Miguel Alemán. So this is another maybe 16 miles where there is conditions to put water to and maintain some habitat. Anyway.
Francisco, just a quick question for you. If you don't mind going back one slide, sure. I'm just going to ask a quick question between Yuma and the end of the end of the upper estuary. Yeah, right there. If you could let us know how long, what the distance is there in miles. And then we have a question too about, are the 2021 in-channel flows going to continue in future years? Okay. From Yuma, or from really Morelos Dam, which is here kind of west of Yuma, to what we will call the river mouth, is about 100 miles. 100 miles. And then the question about in-channel flows, the Minute 323 has allocates water for in-channel flows. And last year, it was just one of several events. So the answer to the question is yes. We are hoping that there will be additional flows. Hopefully this year, it hasn't been finalized, but in future years, through 2020,
more likely 2025. So there is more water available for the remaining of minute 323. When it's going to happen, we don't know. It depends on the binational work, but hopefully this year we'll have the second year in a row of in-channel flows.
So I'm sorry, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
I think this is a great question. I don't know who Agent G is, but thank you for asking that question. And so I was going to ask you this question at the end, but maybe I'll ask you right now. And then if you want to wait till the very end, you just let me know. I was curious how closely you all follow our snowpack levels up here, because just in the Roaring Fork watershed alone, we haven't really had a significant snow event since the new year. And we just recorded record low precipitation at the end of January, and February's been the same. We're all very sad about it. So we desperately need snow always, right? So I guess the question, just to add in maybe a part B to this, what priority does minute 323 have when it comes to, just the conditions aren't allowing for delivery, and, even in Lake Powell, right? Like the deliveries are super low. So, sorry, and maybe I'm not calling it right. Is it minute 323?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so I was just curious about that. Like, where does that agreement come in priority to, what's just happening in the upper basin and throughout the basin before it gets to Mexico?
Well, the agreement, before it was signed, there was a lot of work in terms of, looking at the different scenarios in the basin. So the minute has a specific guidelines when it comes to respond to the levels or the water availability, or the levels of Lake Mead, or the levels in the reservoirs in the basin. So that's kind of built into the agreement, and there are different measures and restrictions. So I guess to answer your question, it is built into the agreement, and the Mexico and the US define specific allocations under different conditions. But the environment also has some, water for the environment has some restrictions too, but it is part of minute 323. So the water that was allocated, there are mechanisms built into the minute to account for that, for those shortages or restrictions.
It sounds like a really complex, but also like living document, which is, wow, that's really pretty incredible. And then I will just mention one quick thing. Somebody brought it to my attention, and I thought it was a good thing to point out. You had mentioned from the Morales Dam down to the bottom of the river there in the estuary is about 100 miles. And just for perspective, for people that are here in the Roaring Fork Valley, from the best that we could do with our mapping technologies, from where the Roaring Fork River begins near Independence Pass to where it ends up in Glenwood is 75 miles. So just to give people some perspective for length.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so we're almost at the very end. So I wanted to use this image. It's a small, modest visitor center in Laguna Grande restoration area. And so it's a way to thank you, Christina, and thank everyone. Hopefully, it's in Spanish, but this was like a travel through time, or the river through time. This is here. So this is how all the kind of the plumbing of the Colorado River through time. A little bit, no, I didn't go into the details, but then hopefully you were able to see the opportunities for a healthy river, which is un río sano. So a healthy river will be in English. So this is what we have at the visitor center. So we usually begin explaining, how the river has been, I guess, transformed, or the changes to time. And then we explain the ongoing restoration sites. And I want to just to use this again to thank you, and to, in a way, invite you to be part of the restoration efforts. You don't have to bring your shovel. We have enough for you. But you are invited, you are welcome. A lot of people have participated, and we need more. This is, again, more than 20 years of work, and we are beginning in the last decade to see results. And many of the trees that we planted 10 years ago are there, of course, and now mature trees, and people are enjoying those areas. So again, thank you, and an opportunity to say thank you to my staff in Mexicali, and they do a great job, and I spend a lot of time in the field, and they deserve to be recognized too. So thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing, and this is the time where you, the Q&A time, questions, comments.
Yep, we have a couple of questions for you. So Reese, it looks like you're down in Tucson, so maybe you can join them much sooner than the rest of us for some restoration. But Reese is asking, what was your method for irrigating the plantings?
We had tried different methods, from flood irrigation. It also depends on the conditions and the trees, the type of trees, but the condition of the site, and availability of, if there is an irrigation canal or not. But flood irrigation, we also use drip irrigation. Sometimes we use pole planting, so they don't require irrigation, because just a pole goes into near the groundwater. We use a method that is deep planting. So we have a seedling, and we plant that pretty deep, so it doesn't need irrigation. It goes, it's a seedling, it's not just a pole, but it's a seedling, but it goes closer to the groundwater. So, and the drip irrigation, it goes from very basic drip irrigation with a small pump, with a little more sophisticated, more expensive, or more power in terms of the that you need to irrigate the trees. So.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, Reese, if there's anything else you wanted to ask with that, but you're welcome to unmute yourself to do so. Otherwise, I'll get on to the next question. Okay, you're welcome, Reese. Okay, so this one's from Mendy. Can you talk about the timing of the flows? What time of year are best to receive them, and when are you realistically able to get them?
Well, we look at the historic data in terms of how it used to be, and then we are trying to mimic that. So the peak of the flow, we try to do that during May, June, which is pretty close to how it used to be. Last year, the flows began in May. This year, we are trying to begin or in April, but that's what we have seen on the ground in terms of the availability of seeds from native vegetation, and so May to June will be the peak, but we begin before that, and then we start with a little bit of water, and then we go up to the peak in May or June.
Okay. If there are any more questions, feel free to, you are welcome to unmute yourself, turn your video on and ask as well. Because we don't have any more questions in the chat box, but I have one more question for you. Can you, because you had mentioned that there's a lot of farms and a lot of irrigation in the Mexicali area. Could you tell us what they're growing in those areas?
Yes, it's changing, but we still have a lot of wheat and cotton. Alfalfa is growing, but then we have vegetables, onions, asparagus, cilantro. I like cilantro. But overall, in terms of the area, wheat and cotton are still the main two crops in area, and then probably alfalfa is close after that.
Okay. There's no other questions, so I'm just going to keep asking if that's okay. I have a couple more questions. So it's really, well, first of all, the work that you all are doing is really, I think, impressive and really incredible. And I'm really impressed by your outreach to the local community and having them engaged as family members, as families, not just to go out to enjoy these beautiful areas, but also to help you with restoration projects. And what has the Sonoran Institute found as a successful model to reach out and engage all of those communities? Or is getting water in the river enough? Like the people are like, what's going on here? And so their curiosity is piqued and they come to you.
I think all of the above, depending on the flows are, happened last year, but or environmental education began, for 10 years ago. So at the beginning, it was just visiting schools, making presentations. Now we have an online course, so high school students can take the course and get credit. We work with teachers and provide a toolkit, so teachers will have the materials to use in class. But I would say the most, I guess, effective is field trips, visits to the restoration site, so that they come, they see it. I saw a question about when do we need volunteers. Usually during the planting season, which begins around mid-March, late March to early May. And sometimes we have a second season in the fall, like in September. So the volunteers are mainly during those, those months. So again, it's bringing the people, students or family to the site and have really a experience and a transformation. Many people haven't seen the river, haven't seen, the beaver. I didn't get to see. Well, maybe I don't know if I'm gonna have. Let me show you something. Let me share. Let me know if it shows. Can you see it now?
Yes.
A bobcat, So imagine someone coming and seeing a bobcat. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they even seen it in books, but seeing that in the field, or even a roadrunner, they, especially kids or people from the cities, from the Mexicali, the major cities, so it's a transformation when they come and see the site, they experience the lower temperature. That is really a key. That's why, in 2020 and 2021, because of the COVID, as many people did, we had to adjust, and we didn't do any planting events or any. Last year at the end, we did a few field visits, but hopefully this year we'll be doing more.
Well, it's just another perfect example that water is life. And where the water comes, the biodiversity increases in both the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the humans, right? And we all naturally migrate towards water, and the same is true here and there. And we really applaud you the good work that you all are doing. And maybe in the future, if you all are ever up here for another field trip or a meeting, we can all meet in person, or we can, somehow collaborate this way in the future. Maybe we can connect some students virtually with some of your students, I mean, that might be kind of a fun story for them to tell each other as well.
No, that's a great opportunity. Now with doing it online, we can do it online, or environmental education coordinator, is bilingual. She's done a great job on not only in Mexico but also in the US. So that'll be great. That's the way to do it, and then they can come back, visit the Delta.
Right.
So yeah, let's do it for sure. Yeah,
that would be really great. So we'll connect our education team and see if we can make that happen. So on that note, and just to respect everybody's time, because it is just a tiny bit after 7:30, I just want to thank you so much again, Francisco. We're getting some comments here about how much people enjoyed your presentation. It was really great. Wonderful to connect with you. Thanks for everyone for staying on with us and joining us tonight. I just want to close on this note. We do have a couple of more programs coming up here at in the Roaring Fork Valley. We have a tour of Snowtail site program on March 12th, if you'd like to join us for that. And if you're not already receiving our weekly river and snowpack reports, I invite you to do that. If you're interested, send me a quick email. You all have my email address, and I'll get you registered for that. And then we're both nonprofit organizations, the Sonoran Institute, the Roaring Fork Conservancy, and we love making these presentations available for you for free to the public. But should you be interested in wanting to become a monthly Base Flows donor, we would love to have you become a friend of the organization and help support our work. So on that note, I'm going to say good night to everybody. Francisco, thank you again.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Stop recording, and I will email out the link to where you can find the recording tomorrow. All right, everybody have a great night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.